To the Berwick Planning Board regular meeting for Thursday, January 17th, 2019. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Planning Board members present tonight. We have regular member Sean Winston, we have Niall Shore, we have the Vice Chair Paul Bovair, and we have alternate Mike LaRue. Nicole Fecto is not here tonight, so Mike, you'll be voting tonight. We also have the town planner here, we have the code enforcement officer, and we have James, our planning technician and also webmaster for the town of Berwick. Been out of the habit of officially recognizing you since you haven't been here for so long, so. I'd like to open up public comment session. It's open to any resident or property owner here in the town to come forward and talk about anything that relates to the planning board. I'd like you to know that we do have a public hearing immediately scheduled for right after this on the 6 Industry Drive application. So if we could just reserve our comments for that, but we can come up and public comment session's now open. Please feel free to come to the podium. Going once, going twice. Seeing nobody come forward, close the public comment session. Moving on to the approval of minutes for the December 20th, 2018 meeting.
30 seconds.
He's trying hard. He wants to show you up on your first meeting back.
This is a test.
Okay, anybody with any corrections, additions, deletions? Everything look good? Okay, so the motion will be for approval of the minutes.
I will make that motion that we approve the minutes of December 20th. As written. Second.
All in favor? Okay, that's 5-0. All right, moving on to a public hearing for conditional use application, mineral industry, 6 Industry Drive, map R72, lot 12-5, Aquifer Protection Zone, applicant Northeast Ready Mix. This is a public hearing. Feel free to come forward and just talk about this application only. If you have comments or questions, what we'll do is I'll write them down, and then at the conclusion of the public hearing, when we get into old business for this application, we'll answer those questions. So public hearing is now open for this application only. Feel free to come on up to the podium. You have a question?
Yeah, this is the first we've heard of it.
This is the first you've heard of what?
This deal that's going on there.
Are you in a butter?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
We live at 26 Stone Lane. We got a letter in the mail today for the first time. Or not today.
that sounds about right. And that's why you got a letter in the mail, to let you know that this was the application.
Right, so we don't know anything about the project at all.
So that's we're going to get into that next.
Okay.
But that's why you get the letter, to inform you that there's a project before the planning board and to come here to learn about it. So
Right, well, that's why we brought up this public discussion. Maybe for a little, because usually you see the presentation first and then see that afterwards.
We knew something was going on because of the building that got built and all the noise, you know, the pounding for the last few months.
well, we can keep the public hearing open.
Sure.
As of right now, we can move down to discussing the application.
Absolutely.
So we'll keep.
I'd like to, when was the building built?
Within the last, I would say, month and a half. They're
All right,
still working on it.
actually, if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium, because we have a lot of people who watch this at home, so we need to have the microphones active. If you could just state your name and your address, too.
My name is Pauline Harris. I live at 26 Stone Lane in Berwick. And we are like across the street from that. And we've been hearing the pounding for several weeks to a month and a half, 2 months.
2 months, so
And so we knew something was going on, but we never knew what was going on. And
So
one
you
morning
were-
I wake up and I look across and I says, oh, there's a new building over there.
if your recollection is that the building started in the month of November, 2 months ago?
Okay, I'll let my husband.
All right.
No, they started doing all kinds
Can you
of,
just state your name, too?
my name is Richard Harris, and I live at 26 Stone Lane. What my wife was trying to say is that the building has been up for more than 3 or 4 weeks. They actually started doing stuff on the site about November. The end of
Do you
November,
remember when
beginning
they started
December.
construction of the building?
No, because we don't normally go down that far on our property.
Okay.
The only time we do that is when we come in through the back way to our yard, and we don't come in that way very often.
But it is up now.
There is a building of some sorts up there with a roof on it.
Thank you.
I don't think it's completed, but there,
It wasn't there
Say about
before, and it is
90%.
there now.
It is there now. There was nothing back there. There was a couple of old trailers that were used, I guess, for construction, but nothing else. And they've all been torn up, and they moved all kinds of metal out of there. There's all kinds of metal in there right now.
This is public hearing for this application here at 6 Industry Drive. Feel free to come on up to the podium.
Should we have Dan tell us about the notice of
Yeah.
violation now?
All right, we're going to leave the public hearing open. We'll move into old business, and we'll start discussing this application. So it's conditional use application for a mineral industry at 6 Industry Drive, map R72, lot 12-5, Aquifer Protection Zone, applicant Northeast Ready Mix. And we'll start off with the town planner, and then I'm sure you're going to want to give it over to the CEO.
Sure. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll basically go through my memo verbatim since it's a lot of information to digest, but I think it's important. So as you recall, on January 3rd, there was a site walk for the application at 6 Industry Avenue. Upon arrival for the site walk by all the planning board members that were present, staff, and project representatives, it was noted that a great deal of work had begun on the site, including the placement of the plant and admix building structure. There were also a placement of what might be stone and sand bin. I have a picture of that, I believe. As you know, the purpose of the site walk was to see the property prior to the granting of any approvals. The project has not received any approvals from the planning board to date, putting the application and the site in violations. The code officer has issued a violation notice today to the site per Phil Saucier, the town's attorney. On January 10th, the staff, along with Phil and the planning board chairman, met to discuss the issue and how to handle it going forward. This memo will discuss several issues for the board's consideration, including Article 9, Section 9.1. And that goes further into my memo, but basically it says, after the effective date of this ordinance, which was back in the 1990s, I believe, no person shall, without first obtaining a permit, engage in any activity or use of land or structure requiring a permit in this district in which such activity or use would occur, or expand, change, or replace an existing use or structure, or renew or discontinue. It goes on, it's fairly lengthy, but basically it says that the planning board has no choice but to deny the application. If you choose to table the application, which is a choice you have, or approve the application, I've given you some options for that as well. Or other issue, let's see, and there are other issues that impact the general subdivision which Mick has created, but has nothing to do regarding this application, although I want to raise those as well, just for knowledge purposes. I would suggest that the planning board could table this application in a good faith effort to resolve those outstanding issues by the following actions. 1, based on the notice of violation issued this past week to the applicant, stop all work on this project until the planning board has approved the application, if you choose to do so. 2, the applicant pay for all of SMPDC consulting fees as well as the town's attorney fees incurred during this process to the town prior to the planning board approval. 3, the applicant place a surety bond, letter of credit, or check equal to the full cost of construction for all infrastructure associated with this site in the town's possession prior to planning board approval. And 4, if the applicant plans on operating a rock crushing operation on site, the plans be revised to show the location of the equipment and location of raw rock material on the site as part of the review. I inserted that comment simply because of the amount of material that's piled on the site, and it looks like it's the type of material that would be used in a rock crushing operation. They may tell you that it's not, but I'd like to have that clarified, and if it's going to be done, then we need to address that as part of this review and approval. Once the above issues have been addressed, the planning board chooses to approve the application, the following conditions will also be required of the applicant. 1, all of the infrastructure on Lot 5, as well as the roadway back to the northeasterly portion of Lot 3 and cul-de-sac upgrade must be completed prior to the startup of the operation. 2, all proper building permits be sought and issued by the CEO along with any certificate of occupancy permits which must be issued prior to the startup of the operation. 3, the applicant pay the town for a third-party engineering firm to be on-site daily during the construction, and that all construction logs be turned over to the town upon completion of the work satisfactorily to the third-party inspector. And 4, the applicant provide the town an as-built plan post-construction for the town's records. I have also provided findings of fact for the board's consideration to use on this application should the planning board choose in fact to deny the application. And I say see the attached, they're part of your submission. Other matters pertaining to the MIC portion of the subdivision, I have found that there is a solid waste permit issued by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection for the operation of the tub grinder and wood bark mulch operation. I don't know why it says that. So any of the bark mulch and everything, the bark and wood and stumps that you saw out there is a permitted use on that property per DEP. None of the stormwater ponds were constructed as shown on the approved subdivision plans. This, of course, is a local matter, but since the subdivision was approved by Maine DEP, they will be looking into this issue as well. The purpose of the ponds is twofold. First, they are to control where and how much water leaves the site, but also the ponds are used to filter the water, and the approvals were based on a certain level of total suspended solids, TSS, in the water leaving the site. We have no guarantees at this time that those levels are being met. Maine DEP will be visiting this issue. Note 11 on the original approved subdivision plan indicates that the fire department shall have year-round paved access to the fire pond shown on sheet C2. The existing gravel road shall be upgraded to the satisfaction of the fire department. This is a condition of the approval for the project and has not been met. Maine DEP will also be looking at that. Maine DEP, as I understand it, plans on visiting the site tomorrow morning. I think at this point it's weather permitting, but they are going to be coming down to visit those issues. Those issues were not issues that we raised or staff raised. They were, it was a complaint filed by someone in the public who called the DEP, and that certainly raised the DEP's concern. It happens to be the timing is such that it's the same time that this project is going on, so I just want that out there as well. And as part of your submission is the draft findings of fact if you choose to deny the application. Again, staff is suggesting that the appropriate way to be to table or postpone any action on this application till the applicant's given a chance to meet items 1 through 4 as part of my memo, and then allowing, if you choose to approve the project after that, with the conditions that we've proposed on that part as well. That is with the guidance of the town's attorney as well in this application.
Yeah. Dan, did you have anything?
Just the same walkthrough that most of you attended. I have had no permits come before me for approval or review, and my letter of stop work was as much as I've had to contribute to this.
How'd the board like to proceed?
I think just, I know that this is kind of a strange happening for a public hearing for an application, and it looks like we haven't had, and we probably will not have a full presentation of what it is we're dealing with here, but maybe just a real quick summary for anyone that's interested listening, where it is, the players involved, and what we're looking at, you know, what's happened. Just a quick summary. And
Do you want to come up with a plan?
Thanks, board members and Mr. Chairman. My name is Lou Chamberlain from Attar Engineering, and I'm representing Northeast Ready Mix. With me tonight are Charlie and Lenny from Northeast Ready Mix and their attorney, Brad Moran. So we've been working on a site plan and a conditional use application for this project. It is located on Industry Drive in the previously approved Mick Construction subdivision. That's kind of a commercial subdivision that was approved back in the mid-2000s. And we're dealing with Lot 5. Our plan shows that lot. It's back at the end of Industry Drive near the cul-de-sac, and it is about 8 acres in size. For reference, Route 4 is out toward the top of the page, and South Berwick is to the bottom of the page. To the left is Stone Lane. This is not working. Oh, okay, actually, I'm good. Thanks. And as I said, it's about an 8-acre lot, and the footprint of what we're proposing is about 1.5 acres, and it's aligned close to the cul-de-sac. And so what Northeast Ready Mix wants to do is construct and operate a concrete batch plant, and basically what they'll do is take cement and aggregates and mix them with water and make concrete, load it into trucks, transport the concrete to job sites. And they'll have a small office associated with that, parking for employees and overnight storage of concrete trucks. And they'll also be washing those trucks out on site, and there's a wash pit with a lined wash pit located on the plan. And so we've discussed before that this is part of an approved subdivision, and there is a drainage system that was approved as part of that. And we've designed this site to fit in with the previously approved drainage, some of which has been noted, has not been constructed, but all of the infrastructure on Lot 5 is proposed to be constructed by this applicant. And we've also been in touch with the DEP and recently received a permit for them to operate and build this site. And so that's a brief summary from our perspective.
All right, thank you.
And thanks for that opportunity.
So you can either table or deny at this point. We have our options out here.
Can we also be heard on some of the proposed conditions now, or?
No,
No.
no, we're talking right now.
we have an open discussion on the pros and cons going either way.
That's what I want to do right now, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the first time, you know, in my being on the planning board that I remember having a 10-year-old subdivision that was approved and never completed for a 6-lot commercial. And then down the road, which is today, one of the lots, Lot 6, gets sold or has an agreement to be sold. And the people move into an already very disturbed area and start working. My first inclination is just to outright deny because of how much work has been done on that site and how messy it is. But then I realized that this is the area of town that we do want to have commercial industrial development, and I think these parties do have, you know, a history in town, and I think my feelings have changed, that I think I would table this and see how this gets resolved by both on lots 5 and on lot 6, as far as the cleanup and getting a base set of documents from engineers to tell us how to start and to go forward. That's my feeling now.
I would be inclined to agree with Paul with one change, which is that we do not table this indefinitely.
Correct. I was just thinking the same thing.
That we put a time limit, and I would suggest no later than our second meeting in February. And if that time all of the conditions outlined in Lee J's memo have not been met, and we don't have a satisfactory response from the CEO that they're no longer in violation, that at that point we consider a denial.
Would the DEP review of what's going on have an impact on, I mean, to me, it would almost make sense to table this until we do get some information from external sources, the DEP in this case.
So why don't we table it until the 21st. At that time, we can see where we are. And we can either extend the table if DEP hasn't responded, or move on the application itself and find out whether it's still in violation or not.
Think you're going to get something from DEP in a month?
Well, I think part of it, a couple of things on that. One is, while the DEP is certainly visiting the MIC portion of this project, which really has nothing to do with Lot 5, although it does in the sense that the rest of the infrastructure that needed to be constructed hadn't been constructed, which is stormwater ponds that feed into the stormwater pond on their site. Those are separate issues. I just wanted to raise them because they had been raised during this process, and that the DEP had contacted us because of that. Again, I think their ability to visit the site and make some decisions is if they get out there tomorrow and we're not having any snow event, although the snow event tomorrow is supposed to be like 1 to 3 at the most. Then I'm sure I will have communication with them. They've been good in keeping me up to date on what they're doing and whatnot. It's been tough for them to just come down and visit the site because they've got multiple departments that have needed to be invited. And so gathering the people that need to come and getting them timing-wise has been their issue. But tomorrow is the day, as I understand it. But yeah, I should be able to have some sort of information back to you in a month, I would assume. Again, weather permitting. And if they don't get there tomorrow and we get dumped on Sunday, they may not be able to get out there till March or April, who knows. But I really do think, for the most part, many of the issues that they're dealing with are separate from the issues that we're needing to deal with on this site. So I just want to kind of make sure that I at least keep those separated for your discussion. But
I think we should be tabling it with a timestamp like Niall says, and then discuss it again later on. And if we have to change the date, we have to change the date. But
As far as retabling again.
Yeah. If the criteria is not met, then to a certain point, we should extend it.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, this application could get approved and get constructed, and then it's not going to matter because it's not going to function the way it's supposed to function without the rest of the road and the subdivision built the way that it's supposed to be built. I mean, who's going to be responsible for fixing and correcting everything that's wrong with the rest of the subdivision?
Right.
I guess that's my big question. Right. How is that going to get properly constructed prior to this piece being built? Because this will be a piece of it, but if everything upstream isn't there, then there's what's the point of the rest of it being constructed? it's not gonna do anything.
So I think that's
Right.
that's a very good question, Sean, and I think part of that answer might come from DEP's visit. I'm only speculating. I don't know what the answer might be, but they may come back and say, well, based on what we're seeing on the site, those ponds aren't necessary. They're going to need to go back to DEP and seek an amendment to get rid of those ponds. I mean, I don't know, but they could come back and say they really don't need those. I don't know what they're going to say, but that is a possibility. So I mean, I think it's a good question, and I think
And I mean, it's not just the ponds, it's
Right.
the fire department, it's not paved. I don't even know if there's a discernible road out there right now from the pictures I've seen.
No.
So,
no.
I don't know how does that get constructed?
I mean, right. I mean, those are certainly valid questions and issues, and I don't have those answers right now.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to propose, Brad Moran for the applicant here, Northeast Ready Mix. Obviously, my client would prefer to have it tabled over denied, or obviously that's what we would want. But I was hoping at least maybe tonight, maybe we could talk about some of the proposed conditions of approval. It seems like we might be able to make some progress on some of those things tonight, even if you're going to be coming back at a later date.
Perhaps your client should have thought about that before starting construction without our approval. So I don't think you're really in much of a position to suggest that we ought to act for the convenience of your client tonight when he acted in total violation of the will of the people of Berwick.
I'm just saying that Lee J had presented something and you have it in front of you, and if you like, we're prepared to discuss some of those things today so that it might, I'm suggesting it
Well,
might make
there
it more
are-
efficient.
There are 4 conditions outlined here.
Let's start with those.
I'd be more than happy to have you discuss those, since that will determine what happens after they're done tabling.
The letter of credit, the fees, I don't think those things are big issues. I mean, my client, those are not the most important issues that we're talking about tonight, okay? My client indicates they don't have a rock crushing operation. They're not going to be seeking permission for a rock crushing operation. That's not going to be part of the request for approval. So we don't feel that would need necessarily to be part of that. I mean,
Can you explain why Lee J is under the impression that they are, based on what he saw out there?
there's a pile of rocks and there's
Hot
crushed.
top,
Yeah.
cement, it's reclaimed, it's been there for 20 years, ever since we've owned the property. The own town of Berwick's hauled hot top in there, we reclaim it and we put it back in the gravel. It just happens to be sitting there when they approached me about purchasing the land, that's all. That's actually a small pile, usually it's huge, it grows, and like I say, all the towns haul in there. I stopped them probably about a year ago, because I've been trying to clean the place up. But it's not rocks, it's got cement, it's hot top, it's reclaimed.
But these guys aren't gonna be doing that, so that won't be on the
No,
property.
We can move that.
Yeah, on their particular lot. The, on the third-party engineering firm, our position probably don't need an engineer on there daily. I mean, we do have a code enforcement officer. I mean, this would be an enforcement matter about whether they construct according to plans and all this stuff. Having an engineer on there, if the town was going to hire a third-party engineer, you probably could do periodic inspections or inspections at the end. Having a daily presence, I would submit, is maybe not necessary in this case. Obviously, as built, post-construction, plans can be prepared. That's no problem at all. The other thing my client wanted me to raise tonight, they've got 15 employees. Some of these items, and I heard discussion about like having everything done before the next meeting. One of these items is going to be construction of a road, and we all know that's not going to be able to happen this time of year. So if anything can be done that will enable them to start up operations at some point, even if the road hasn't been yet completed, as long as they can access the property safely, it will enable them to basically save the business and be able to operate. To have everything nailed down before they can mix a single bags of concrete would probably cause it to fold. I don't think they would be able to do that. So if there could be something done where they could access the property safely, and obviously be under the obligation to complete all these improvements, including this cul-de-sac and everything, that would be something that would be very much important. And then with regards to the other items on other lots in the subdivision, I mean, the only issue here is, like, my client doesn't have any control over those people. We can't, like, if you say that's all gonna be done, my client can't go onto their properties and make improvements in those things. If they're under obligations to do that as a matter of enforcement, that could be made to force them to do those things. But at least Northeast Ready Mix, you know, it's not within their power to go do these things on the other lots. They will obviously have to ensure that whatever is on their lot is in compliance with what the plans are on record. Is there anything else you want me to?
We're not lawbreakers. We had a gun put to our heads. You know, we've been since April trying to get this going along, and when we started 3 years ago, I'm not sure, but I think it was Paul that asked, why don't we go over to the industrial park? Which we didn't know the land was for sale at that time. That's why we never went over there. And we had to get out. Our rent was put up from $1,200 a month to $6,500 a month. And we had to pay, I think it was either 4 or 5 months from that point until December 31st, which we did, paid that up front. And then we had to get out. That's it. We're not making $6,500 a month, believe me. Lennon and myself have not made a penny yet in 3 years. So I know that doesn't mean anything to this proceedings, but
Okay, well, I appreciate that, thanks.
that's what
And obviously, as part of this process, the permits will resolve any of these land use violations that are currently pending. So that's what we want to do.
We're more than willing to do anything that we have to do. But right now, there's like 3 feet of frost on the ground.
All right, so we're looking at a motion to table this application until February 21st. Is that the second meeting? February 21st, okay. Would anybody like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion that we table this application until February 21st, or until such time, if the DEP, if some kind of an agreement comes forth that would allow it to go under review again, but that we do nothing until that date.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, all right.
And is that all it would take, is that DEP thing?
Well, no, it would take these 4 things here.
Right, but I mean is there anything other than that, those 4 things and the DEP thing?
These 3 things, you're not operating rock crushing, but it would take these 3 things to get back on the agenda to reopen the well, not reopen the application, to continue it. I don't know what the opposite of table is.
Correct. To bring off the table.
Yeah, to remove it off the table. So I have a question for like code and planning.
Yep.
With 2 entities involved in this, the
Yep.
owner of all the subdivision, and then the owners that would like to have the applicants, and the attorney is only working for the applicants right now. Is it part of our job as a planning board to coordinate or give them direction on how to coordinate amongst themselves? Or is it their engineer, or who's going to do that? Is it on their side of the?
It's really their responsibility.
It is.
You know, again, I'm trying to be as fair as I can, and I've said several times, and I certainly respect where Brad's coming from. The DEP issues relevant to the rest of the subdivision, generally speaking, do not have anything to do with these folks. It happens to be a separate issue raised at the same time, but it is within the subdivision that we're dealing with.
The
And
6
some of it,
lots. All
yes,
6 lots.
and some of it is this stormwater issue. Until I hear from DEP and find out what position they're taking on that, I can't give you an answer, but I think that will certainly become clearer soon, hopefully, after tomorrow. I was invited to go on that walk, and I would have had that information tomorrow, but I have to be north for another meeting that I'm attending. So, I think that will help clear some of that information up as to who's going to be responsible for what. Certainly, they're not responsible for anything other than Lot 5, and that's, I wouldn't require anything other than Lot 5, except for the road issue. And certainly, I completely understand what they're saying about the road issue, and I think if we get to that point, that's something that we could possibly have a little flexibility on, considering there'll be a letter of credit, a bond, or cash or something in place that would cover the cost of that construction if they did not proceed with it. So I think we can be flexible within some of the bounds of that. And just keep in mind, many of the issues the DEP is going to look at are irrelevant to this applicant.
Can we get a review by both the fire department and the police department as to the ability of emergency vehicles to access Lot 5 between now and February 21?
I'm sure we can do that. I'm looking at James. I think it's just a request of the fire chief and/or police chief to.
Well, and they need to be made aware of the situation, that they're gonna have to physically send somebody out there. This is not when the review of the map is gonna work. And we need to know whether emergency vehicles can or cannot get into that
Sure.
Lot 5.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is medical marijuana production facility, 398 School Street, map R54, lot 19-1, in the R3 zone on Route 9. Applicant is David Springer.
Sam? Next, yes.
The applicant's not present.
Not here?
I'm not here.
No phone call or anything? You didn't hear? Okay. All right.
I'll talk with him tomorrow and.
Unless you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, feel free to leave. We won't take offense to it, so. I know a lot of people don't want to stay for the whole entire meeting, so. You're welcome. So we left the public hearing open, and it's tabled, so we could do another public hearing on this again, and not have to advertise for another public hearing. That's why we're keeping the public hearing open.
Correct. Correct.
But we should tell this nice couple that if they want to come back on the 21st.
Yeah, absolutely.
And did anybody else come for the public hearing, do we know? Were any of those other people here for the public hearing?
They were all here with the application.
Okay, so these are the only abutters.
How do we let people know if we're not gonna send out notices again? Should we give them advice on where to look to find out the next time we're gonna be covering this?
Yeah.
I mean,
We could tell our webmaster and Facebook administrator, he can more information about the next time that we're going to meet, if we are going to meet on this application on the 21st, can be found.
Facebook and our town website. Yep.
Okay.
And if people call, your office is the right place to call.
Extension 124.
There you go. I don't know if you
Mr.
heard
and
that.
Mrs. Harris? That was your name? I'm not sure if you heard what was just going on. We will consider this application again on February the 21st, and the public hearing will still be available if you have anything more to say and would like to return.
I'll mark my calendar.
And please tell your neighbors the same. They got the letter, but
Well,
nobody
the
showed up.
thing is one's gone to Florida right now. Actually, two of them's gone to Florida right now.
Won't be back until
So-
All right, well, just to let you know, we will take this up on the 21st of February, and there will be an opportunity for public hearing if you have anything more to say, or just want to watch.
You can also look at the town website, the Berwick website, or extension 24 and 698-1101, and James will
124.
answer.
124.
120.
124, sorry. James will answer and
Tell you everything you need to know.
answer questions.
The biggest thing we're worried about is the well.
All right, well, we can't talk about that anymore right now, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you on the 21st.
Have a nice night.
Say it as well.
Next to new business is a minor subdivision, 365 Hubbard Road, map R11, lot 4. This is in the Aquifer Protection Zone, and the applicant is England. All right, Lee J, let's start off.
Yes, I have not provided you a memo on this. In fact, it's small enough that I think I've started drafting just the findings of fact on it. This is a sketch review for you tonight on this application. The applicant, I think you have a plan set in front of you. The applicant has a fairly extensive amount of land. One parcel has already been sold off. The landowner, as I understand it, several years ago. Within the 5-year period, that's why we're at minor subdivision. The new owner wants to split off their parcel for their home lot with frontage on Hubbard Road and provide a 50-foot right-of-way leading to access to the rear acreage for future use, which would be the third parcel. So I will let the applicant or his representative talk on their behalf, and you can provide them any feedback or other information you feel you need in order to review this for minor approval.
Dustin Morrill, Line Pro Land Surveying. From the time you guys got the plans till now, I met with Lee J and we decided to do a few minor adjustments by extending the right-of-way and having the 3 acres go over and touch the right-of-way. As you can see here, this goes a little bit deeper, and this 3 acres, not quite as square as it once was, but to provide them access in the back for one lot, residential or wood lot or whatever they want to do with it. Client he didn't need that much land, and he was happy with the 3 acres, so he's trying to sell off the back part. Which in the future, if anything goes on there, it has to revisit you guys, which is kind of a good thing. Instead of having someone try to cut it up every 5 years like some people do. Pretty straightforward. Questions?
Pretty straightforward. Okay. Questions, comments? So this is a sketch plan, so next we can get them back on in old business.
Correct.
And then we can get in there and then
Correct.
approve the findings of fact.
Yep.
and go all the, view all that, so.
Yep. I mean, there's some minor things that need to be done in order to just, get it in shape for approval. All 3 lots need to be numbered as 1, 2, and 3 on the parcels. I don't know whether you're gonna need or want any additional topo. I mean, it's a fairly large site. It would be kind of cruel to require them to put any additional topo on that, especially the back lot. And at this point, the only thing they're doing that really does anything is provide access to the rear to whoever wants to purchase that.
With the lots 1, 2, and 3, been over this many a times with different planning boards, but we can't include lot 1 if there's any, which this one probably isn't, but it would be more lots 1 and 2 because a lot of times there's, right-of-way verbiage and stuff that this lot that was created prior wouldn't have to accommodate, I guess. So we'd have to put lots 1 and 2 on it because we're really just splitting this. That's not part of the subdivision.
Well, this is clearly a discussion that I've had with others as well. I mean, it is part of the subdivision because it's been split within the 5-year period.
Right.
If it was staying under the Wentworth and they were splitting the rest of the land, you would be correct because they would have their first split would not be considered a lot in a subdivision, so they'd only have 2 lots. But because this is under different ownership now, and you're within the 5-year period, it's 3 lots.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't even be here.
Right, no, I get that,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't be, just, I just went over it a few times in a couple other towns, and they didn't consider that a 3rd lot. Even though it was still a subdivision, they didn't consider that. They had to abide by the subdivision regulations.
Well, then it needs to be considered a lot in the subdivision.
That's because this is within 5 years. If this
Correct.
was 6 years, then that wouldn't even be a consideration, but because it's within the 5 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, I guess that's it.
Could I add one thing? In the past, we used to ask for, in case the big lot ends up being built on, a good chance it will be, just have a test pit dug showing that it can be built on.
Yeah.
We could probably, I mean, it depends on how the board feels now, but I mean, if we could ask for that at the time, or the code enforcement officer could just make sure it's there. But in the past, when you had a subdivision, it would show that there is viable soils for
I
building.
think that there is some soil samples in here, right?
Yeah.
The initial application.
Yeah, in the initial application.
Soil survey.
Application form. Soil, the soils are there, but there are no test pits.
Yeah, there was no
Yeah,
test pits done.
It just says we're not sure where they want to build.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a wetland that kind of cuts up through the middle of it.
Yep,
And my guess is you probably would be staying uphill towards Hubbard Road.
probably right behind
Yeah.
Mr. England's lot, but I weren't sure of whatever owner, I mean, they put a lot of test pits out there, we're not sure who wants to, where they want to build, I guess.
But at least if you show there is a place to build,
Yeah.
you're proving your point.
All right.
So are we requiring a test pit? Is that, or no?
I think you're gonna have a test pit if somebody decides to build back there.
Right, for the town.
Time,
And they can
Construction.
pick the location or
Right,
where they want to build.
correct.
Okay.
you know, is it, based on the acreage and what's buildable, is it only 1 lot that would be left back there?
Well, yeah, unless they come back in front of you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty dry behind the house.
yeah.
Yeah.
Gets a little, it's flat is what it is out back, kind of where you can kind of see in the middle there where you was talking about the creek. Towards the river, starts getting drier, so if somebody wanted to put a driveway back about 1,500 feet, they could probably get a house back there, but more than likely, it'll be behind where my property is, and it's pretty dry back there with the same similar soils.
I don't see a reason to request.
No.
No.
And I'm sure code enforcement, Dan would, before you issue a building permit, you make sure that's
Yeah.
part of the
It
submittal.
would need to be, they need an HHE 200 form,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Be
Fine.
part of the septic design too.
Yeah.
So.
All right, that's it. Thanks.
See you February 7th.
I will have the findings of fact done for you.
All right, moving on, in new business, land use ordinance amendments, talking about scheduling a public hearing on February 21st. So why are we doing February 21st? I guess that's the timelines for the town, right?
Yeah, that's the paperwork and stuff is due to
See you
the
later.
town manager February 22nd. We're at that time again.
All right, want to just talk about some of your,
Sure. So the first one, just thinking about our low impact industrial. It's a few options. either allow low-impact industrial in the shoreline commercial industrial district. And the thought process behind that is you have Corner Point Brewing right now is a non-conforming use because that's a low-impact industrial use in the shoreline commercial industrial zone, but they got in before the zoning change. Also, you have a little tiny piece of Prime that's in the shoreline commercial industrial zone. You have 6 Sullivan, Devon Duke, and the Subway building are also all in shoreline commercial industrial. So 6 Sullivan comes in, if they wanted to do a bakery, they wouldn't be able to do that based off of our definition of low impact industrial. So either allow low impact industrial in SCI or maybe split low impact industrial into one that's more restrictive and one that's less restrictive, or just simply allow brewery, or we just split out breweries and allow that in SCI. So we can think.
If you're gonna split it out and be more restrictive, wouldn't you have to list
Yeah,
them?
I mean, I.
You'd have to have a whole list of things that you would,
Yeah.
is it,
Restrict and
involve
allow.
chemicals and
Yeah.
this and that.
So can we go
Is it
back to the
hazardous?
original discussion that we had on why we put an X in SCI for, when we talked about the new industrial, light industrial instead of low impact, for example? Did we have a discussion on putting that was only a year and a half ago, that we went from a C to an X? What was the discussion about when we did this?
I can't remember now.
And
I
don't
think I remember it. I remember it. There was a lot of changes at the time. And I just think we're going down the list of, do we allow it there? No.
Rush through there then?
I wouldn't. You could say that. I don't want to say rush, but I just. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there was a larger discussion on the
And-
implications of it.
Like-
I just think the way that the low impact industrial definition is like 8 lines, and it's a pretty. It wasn't the intended consequence to not allow those uses. The reason why that came to be is John and I realized that pretty heavy industrial uses could go into Prime. They could open up at Prime the way that we had it.
But not the light so much. We have a new.
And that's what we want.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So that's why that's how because we used to have industrial, medium intensity industrial, and then
Right.
light intensity industrial.
Went down to 2.
We got rid of medium because the definition of medium was the same as low or light at the
So
time.
I have a question for our planner then.
Yes,
So
sir.
you get around Southern Maine more than we do.
Yes, sir.
I go by lots of towns. I can like Brunswick and Portland and, we're all on rivers.
Yes.
In some places, there's a lot of development on the river.
Yes.
Why are we so intent here? Because we want to face the river and use it cleanly.
Yep.
And I'm wondering why, as the town, we have Gateway Gas that maybe will be redeveloped into something someday.
Yep.
We have a lot of restrictions at SCI. We have the underlying district that has to be held to, which is shoreland.
You also, sorry to interrupt, but you also look at the lot size requirement for SEI. I think it's 60,000 square feet, regardless if it's tied into town sewer or not.
So, I would need to jog my memory a little bit, and I could do some research on that for you. I think you might. I understand the need or want to do this, and maybe we do it as an interim step. Some urban areas, if you will, that are along the river are able to forego shoreland zoning or drop it down, I think, to a 25-foot setback and be very less restrictive in the stuff. I mean, talking 60,000 square foot in the downtown area, in my mind, you'd be wanting to talk 5,000 square feet in a downtown area.
First of all, there are no 60,000 square foot lots in downtown Berwick on the river.
I mean, in what I would call an urban area, your village area, you want to have small lot sizes rather than large lot sizes, which is what you want in the rural area. But I also think that there's some ability to adjust that in the shoreland zone. I'd like to be able to do a little bit of research on that because I didn't have a history with this and I wasn't sure what you were trying to accomplish. But I can do some work on that for you and come back with I think might be an answer to make it even better.
Yeah, are there towns more close to Berwick, like in York County, for example, that are on the Saco River or whatever, Ospey River, that you could look at then?
Sure, of
Yeah.
course. Of course.
And see what, when I drive through these towns, I see a lot of activity on the river, and a lot of them.
It's a little bit more restrictive, but it's the same idea. We've been working, I do a lot of work in Ogunquit, and we've been working with a client in Ogunquit to change some of their shoreland zoning to a general development, residential general development, no, not residential, a general development zone in the shoreland zone with a much more reduced setback to allow certain development to occur. I am sure that's the same type of thing we can look at here. But before I speak out of turn, let me do some research.
Okay. Do you know if the state has a play in whatever decisions we may do?
Yes, they do, because it would still be shoreland zoned. But I know that previous to his departure, Mike Morse went over what we were proposing in Ogunquit, and he had no issues with it. So I'm sure I can have that same conversation with the new person and figure something out.
Yeah, and I think, James, that's probably a pretty important thing to settle out and find out, what it is we can do. We have the park going up on Great Falls Park.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Gateway Gas piece. We have the One Sullivan piece, and you have two large apartments, and I'm sure they don't meet the density at all. They're grandfathered, and then you have the Brackett and Shaw piece, which is quite large. And I think, down the road, 10 years, whatever, things are going to start happening to those, so we ought to have that figured out.
Yep.
I should be able to have an answer for you by the 7th, meeting for the 7th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So for Animal Farm, right when it got voted in, I talked with our animal control officer, and she suggested that we regulate by enclosure. So that's why under other Animal Farm, the required lot or enclosure size shall be determined by the municipal officer charged. So, and I wrote in the justification, I think that sentence there, the municipal officer could be Dan, it could be a police officer, or it could be that animal control officer.
I think we're going to start seeing some people with cows on half-acre properties with a little shed.
Right, and then
Well, at
then
that point-
the animal.
Could we say that it's not located in R1 zone?
That's the way it is now, I
Well,
think.
Well,
roosters aren't allowed.
roosters aren't, but it's not stated that cattle's not.
No, because we did the one bovine animal
Per acre.
Yeah.
Oh, but it looks like that's being proposed to be stricken.
So I had
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
So they're
I like
suggesting
that.
limit it by lot size versus number of animals, or?
Yeah. Well,
Well-
enclosure size.
So I had a longtime farmer in Berwick who said that, he would be, that would,
limiting cows in an enclosed area is kind of tough. If they're in a big barn all the time and not grass, pasture, how are you going to control the numbers? That's we're restricting at that point.
and this gentleman would have a large, he has a farm,
Yeah.
and he would probably have more cows than, I'm not
Per
a
acre.
farmer, so I'm out of my element here, but I would, and then with the horse thing, I know there's a horse you see on School Street, and I would doubt that they have an acre of cleared land on that parcel. But if the way to make sure animals aren't being abused is if we see something, the animal control officer can say that enclosure is not large enough for these animals, and she would have the expertise to make that judgment call. I just think with maybe the cattle thing can stay, but the horse. I mean, Lee J, I guess you'd know because your partner deals with horses and stuff. But
Yep.
I just think you can get a 1.5 horses per cleared hay, but I don't think that person has that.
No, but that person would be grandfathered at this
Grandfathered,
point.
right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like, okay, the ordinance is in effect, now go out and tell them they can't do it.
Yeah.
They're allowed, they can do it.
But I just think
It's going forward so that no others do anything like that.
so. Yeah.
What do you think about the cattle? Because I think that you wrote that.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I mean, again, that was a standard that basically came from the state, and the state has embraced that type of a standard. I suspect that it's because they know what's best for the cattle to be able to roam, to graze, to have some moving room. I mean, you talk about the horses, and I'm not going to get into a lot of philosophical stuff, but, our horse is in a in their enclosure in the night, which we would call an enclosure, which is a 10 by 10, but they're let out to pasture every day, and the pasture field area is very large for the horse to go and graze and get some breathing room when they're not being worked. So, I mean, it's the same with cattle. I mean, they may be big and slow and don't do much, but they need breathing room, and they need room to be able to get out and deal with their life, if you will. But I mean, if you want something lesser than that, I mean, I think I would still try to tie it to some sort of a land size, rather than saying an enclosure, because an enclosure to one person could be a 10 by 10. An enclosure to another person could be a 200 by 200. There's no definition of enclosure by size of animal.
Could be a closed-in area with walls or
Right.
a fence.
Right.
Yeah.
I can reach out to our animal control officer and just see if she has any specific feedback on dealing with this specifically. Because I don't know. I'm not
Who is our animal control officer?
I don't
I mean,
know.
I thought you were it, because I thought anything that I thought it was all. I thought you fell under everything. Do we? Is it?
I delegated it. Yeah, we have a new. She was appointed like 6 months ago, 7 months ago.
Yeah.
It works for the town.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, she's a very nice lady. I met her today.
She's an employee of the town.
Yep. Had a badge and everything.
I'm not sure if that falls under police
Heard about my
department,
rabbits.
but if you go to the police department, she's on the staff page.
Most animal control officers do come under police,
Right.
so that they have law
Backup.
authority and backup. Yeah.
But she was okay in November when this passed. She didn't.
She didn't. No. She questioned it after it was passed.
Yeah.
I don't think she was appointed until probably after. She didn't see it until after.
Well, but 6 months ago was before November.
Okay, maybe 6 months. I don't.
I mean, it matters to me whether.
She was aware or not.
I mean, I'm just uncomfortable and we do something, I'm gonna go, oh, never mind. I mean, if we're gonna do it, we should do it and stick to it, and if we're not comfortable, then we shouldn't have done it in the first place.
Especially within 6 months.
I mean, we just did this like, a little bit ago.
Well, it's not complete. I mean, I hear you. I mean, you're not completely repealing it. I think we were addressing an emergent complaint, the summer of animal complaints.
This came out of a bunch of pigs in a very small area.
Chickens and pigs complaints. It was all summer. So this addressed it. I don't think there's any harm in.
Cattle and horses, but sheep got stuck in there. Doesn't anybody speak for the sheep of Berwick to want to protect them?
Well,
Why are we leaving sheep in there?
I hear
per
you.
acre is pretty
I hear you,
good.
and that's why
Lot
I think we can leave it the way it is, and I'll reach out to the animal control officer and see if he has any feedback. But ultimately, our town comprehensive plan seems to be moving forward. We're actually going to be doing that, and I think agriculture will be a big topic. It might even be its own committee, and then we'll let the experts deal with coming up with, recommendations for the next 20 years for where Berwick wants to be. agriculturally wise.
So
Yeah, 'cause,
we should
well-
drop this one is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll reach
Sounds like a good idea.
I'll reach out to the animal control officer and see if she has any specific
Yeah,
feedback.
let's give this a little time to see where we are on this.
Yeah, I
Sounds
mean, this is all, these are, what we based this on was what the state recommends. I mean, we didn't just pull those numbers out of our hat,
No,
so,
or even Lee J's hat for that
no,
matter.
not even DJ's hat.
doesn't even have a hat.
I never wear one.
So, yeah, I don't see why we should just all of a sudden strike this from the.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, the all of a sudden comes from, I had the animal control officer ask about it, and then I had the farmer.
Was there a cow
but,
problem?
but nobody is in potential violation so that we need to be worried that we're creating a problem that we didn't want to create.
Well, we've created a non-conforming horse.
But they're grandfathered in anyway, so.
I'm sure the horse is okay with that.
I haven't asked. I haven't asked.
I'm a nonconformist.
All right,
Mr. Ed can tell us when he's ready.
all right, deal.
James,
You old enough to
Moving
remember
on to
that.
number 3.
Hold off on that one for 1 minute. If you remember, 4 years ago, during the Downtown Vision Committee stuff, we had, one of the sessions, 101s that we had, was being a
Yeah.
farm-friendly town.
And
Everybody was nodding, yeah, that's a good
And we
thought, you
certainly
know,
want
of
to
course,
be.
with common sense rules.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know which direction it's going in the future, but a lot of people like to have chickens, rabbits, and a family cow, you know?
It's just too early to know that we have a problem that we need to correct.
I would agree.
And I'm always uncomfortable in fixing a problem that we don't have,
I've heard you say that,
many a time.
yeah.
I think everybody's, ready, everybody wants to be farm friendly, but I don't think people want farms
Right next door to their
down
house. Right.
in the center of town here. And yeah, we have a lot of rural areas, we can have farms out there.
Cool. When we get to the medical marijuana, then we'll talk about farm.
So we need a farm, we don't
That's
need a
another
farm
story
on,
altogether.
we need a farm on Wilson Street.
So what number 3 is doing here, and this comes out of recommendation from one of our Board of Appeals members, because we had a question on note 1 in the dimensional requirements table. And what note 1 does, it allows the setbacks to be reduced by the average setbacks of existing structures and abutting properties. So if in R3 or the Aquifer Protection District, where the dimensional requirements are, 75 feet back from the road and 50 from the side and the rear, if someone else has a structure that's closer, they can reduce it. Do we want that, is my question to you, where in the R3 district, if there was, a house that was put in 75 years ago, that's 25 feet to the road, should the neighboring properties be able to reduce their setbacks? And then does our R3 district start looking like R2?
I think, I remember I was in on that when that was put into the ordinance quite a while ago. And it was for fairness, and I think the thought at the time, we were looking at R1, where you have a lot of houses that are close to the streets, and a new one gets built and whatever space is left between them, and it looks a little odd when you set that house further back. But I think, I would agree with James in R3, if you've got the room, you should have a setback for R3, so it doesn't start looking like R2 or R1. I would agree with that.
I'd agree with that too.
So basically, I think that's a smart thing. Number of towns I've seen do this type of thing. But if you're going to do that for CI R1, I guess the question is, do you want R2, which is kind of your transition area? The other question would be, do you want to not do that any longer in R3 and AP?
Well, I think at least a number of us have said, we don't want to continue to do it in R3.
Right.
So then,
And
why change that.
And
a little
basically AP is, if you look at, AP is,
Pretty much all R3.
this segment here is R3, all of this is R3, but it's, so you want to include AP. This is AP2, but.
Well, you don't want to include it. You don't want them to have the ability to do
have-
that,
yeah, to have a
to shrink their
source. Yeah.
setbacks.
Right.
So you want to somehow exclude them from note 1.
So could we do the following? Could we do this, which is excluded from R3 and AP? Who makes the determination about the average of the the other sizes to grant the variance? Is that? Could we, like, over the next little bit of time, find out how often this comes up in R2? I mean, is this a constant, frequent thing, or is it like once every 5 years kind of thing?
No, it's so you see 5 houses or something have gone up in Diamond Hill Road, and there's some non-conforming lots there, and I mean this will come up. I think this will come up.
How
It comes up.
difficult would it be for you to work your magic and get us one of those wonderful tables you like to do?
Oh, it'd be difficult, but I'm willing to put in the effort. You know, I
You could maybe make it into a paper for your master's.
right.
So I'm,
Pretty boring
School
paper.
project.
so I'm
Paper
just,
should be boring, but that's another story. for
I'm
another
just
time.
also.
I'll look
I'm-
into it. I will.
Well,
yeah.
or just get a, I mean, I'd just like to have some idea of,
I can go back through the permits and just
is
see
this,
what
is
the.
this enough of a problem that we need to think about R2 as well?
So I'm just thinking about it with this, and I also just suggest that, because depending on where you are in one of those zones, the CI or the R1, especially where you're closer to the downtown area, you could have a required setback of 25 feet, which, quite frankly, in the urban type of area doesn't make sense. But you may want to build in some additional wording that says, the average of the lots, but in no case shall it be any closer than 5 feet. You want to have some standard
For a minimum.
so that you can straight face say it's conforming to the ordinance because we've said in no case shall it be any closer than 5 feet, or whatever it may be. But I certainly get the need to try to keep uniformity, keep it closer to the street rather than having some new house being built 25 feet back and everybody else is at 10 feet. But, allow it to come up, but in no case should it go any closer than 5 feet to the property line, something like that.
Also, do we have a definition for abutting properties? Like if you're across the street, for example, I'm thinking to the one that you referred to up on Diamond Hill. Does that include if someone across the street is built closer to the road, you can include them in your average?
So if you're referring back to the past Board of Appeals thing where we included the across
Yeah,
the street,
right.
the across the street abutter is actually added to the setback.
Okay.
So that was
So it was used.
it was used just as a extra step, and if it wasn't used, the setback would have. That case, the house is already built, right? And then we find out afterwards they're.
Yeah,
So-
I'm talking for the purpose of having a definition that the code
Oh,
enforcement.
right, there's no definition of
I was
abutting.
gonna say, so there's no definition of abutting property. And the other way you could fix this would be to say that the setback may be reduced to the average of like setbacks of the existing structures on either side of the parcel being
There's your definition.
permitted,
Yeah.
so that it's clear that it's just either
Now
side.
you're bracketing.
Correct,
Yes,
correct.
yeah.
But to go back to
Not wanting to be really annoying, I can be, I would prefer to use the word contiguous because could be a property in the back.
Sure, no,
well.
that's fine. I think that wording works as well. The intent is just to make sure that
And it sort
you're
of
not,
classes up the definition section a
Yeah.
little bit anyway.
yeah, there you go.
Sounds good.
great. Go
So before you go on, I've got a question. Speaking of annoyance.
Yep.
It would seem of all of the definitions that we should add to the definition section of the land use ordinance, given the circumstances under which we find ourselves, the phrase mineral industry may be one we want to add.
So I thought about that, but one of the exercises James had me do, and we talked about, I think, was I went through the ordinance to make sure that every use had a definition.
Yes.
But I didn't think of, or I knew the game that we could play with it, but I didn't come back and say, but there are things that we need to define that we haven't defined, such as mineral
Mineral industry.
industry.
Good catch.
So,
Also the
Have you found others that are on the table but no definition?
I think I highlighted like 2 or 3, but it was nothing major. And you're actually in very good shape to have your list of uses and what's defined in the ordinance.
But we really do.
The issue is are there other uses that need to be defined that are not even in the ordinance, like mineral industry?
I had an idea. Is there a way that we can, instead of having all these definitions embedded in our land use ordinance, can we refer to, like, there's an APA dictionary, and if we just bought that and had that, is that, no?
No, I have 2 of those books, if you'd like to use one, but I think if we're gonna we gotta add to the ordinance. We can't.
Yeah, we have to
We
put it
can't
in
just
there.
We've got to
reference
make it so
that.
that people can find it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to go, since
By
I don't even know
reference.
what APA stands for.
American Planning Association.
See, I would have called it the Administrative Procedures Act. I know. So we should there is such a thing, actually, so we should definitely put it in the actual land use ordinance.
No, yeah, like,
We want to
and,
make it easy for people to find stuff, not,
Yeah.
and we have things defined in a specific Berwick way, because
Yeah.
that's the way we are.
of course.
So number 4 deals with we have all these basically driveways that are streets that, and also the town has adopted a lot of roads that are unfinished or too narrow, but this deals specifically with dead end streets in R3. You know, we have plowing is the main thing. And this comes at a request from Public Works, and also our town manager also agrees with this. Where
Manpower.
yeah,
Expense, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just getting to the point where there's just too many roads to deal with at this point. And if it's a dead end road, I don't really see a reason for us to accept it until they can prove that there's a connection so they have a loop.
Yeah, I think we did have this discussion, and part of the issue is even if it's a cul-de-sac, you know, the plow guys are going up, turning around, coming back out, going up 200 feet, going to another street, going up. It's getting, you know, it's tiring for them to do that. Driving a truck that way, if it's a hammerhead, you got to go up, you got to, you know, move back up, turn around. And in some cases, you can't even do that. And yeah, we talked about this issue and the idea of not allowing these streets to be petitioned to be public ways until or if connected to another way, so that they can come in one way and go out another way. That would make circulation and travel for these guys a lot easier to maneuver their vehicles.
I noticed we left R1 out there. We have R2, R3, or AP, but yet I think the highest concentration of cul-de-sacs in town are right behind Cumberland Farms.
And they've already been accepted.
Yeah,
But
they have been, but I'm saying they would, that means you may get more of those in the future then.
yeah, we can add. I mean, you could add it.
Yeah.
Why don't we,
I think that's a
we're
good
trying to
idea.
avoid, because I think a lot of people love
yeah,
living
we should
on,
anticipate
dead-end
possibilities,
streets.
and that certainly is a possibility.
yeah.
Mm.
I agree.
So you want to think about what we include there.
Yeah, we
The
do.
other thing with plowing is just the maintenance on the equipment and how much that must.
It's a strain on the equipment, yeah.
That certainly is a strain.
Yep.
Transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys know if a town plow can actually, in the cul-de-sac, for example, behind Cumberland Farms, there's several in there, can they go in there and actually make a circle or maybe one back up and make
I'm
it
not.
out again?
I'm not sure, but we are looking at the road construction standards, and the Public Works is recreating for cul-de-sac standards that will, you know, so a fire truck can
Yeah.
get in and turn around, and for a plow truck to get in there.
That's a big lollipop.
It is, you get 70 feet of truck trying to get around the curve.
Yep.
And then, so I have 4 points of discussions for you to think about, I guess. So on our land use ordinance, on page 1, it has, I didn't have the chance to print it out for you guys, but I can read it. So it says a whole bunch of stuff, and it says, so the purpose of the land use ordinance is to do blah, 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 to prevent overcrowding of real estate. as we're gearing towards a comprehensive plan, I'd like us to think about what overcrowding of real estate means.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's something to figure out tonight. Also, there's an interesting thing in here. Sufficient for all requirements of community life. What is community life? What are the requirements of community life?
Well, you missed an even more troublesome one. It says, to promote a wholesome home environment.
What is a wholesome home? It
We
depends.
certainly are one of the more wholesome groups of Berwick, but I'm not sure that we're in a position to define what in the world that means.
Imagine denying an application. This is not a
lack of
wholesome
wholesome-
wholesomeness. This is not a very wholesome
Now that you
application.
bring it up, I'm going to keep my eye out for the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in one of my leadership classes, it just talks about how like purpose, mission statement, things like that. They're important. So, I think that's more of something we'll get into with the comprehensive planning stuff. But it's just something to think
Oh,
about.
it's a good idea to look. Yeah.
I think one of the other things is maybe looking at the RCI district and reducing some of the dimensional requirements, maybe some of the lot size requirements if they're commercial uses only. There's a lot. So I sent you guys this thing called the Classical Planning Manual. This guy Near, he's a real eccentric guy, and he led us on this 3-week, one of the most unique experiences I've had in college. And he's willing to do it with Berwick, but I really haven't figured out how to put the pieces together. And basically what he'd help us do is establish a vision for the rural commercial industrial district in a similar, maybe smaller scale version of what we did with the downtown vision report. But one of those considerations is allowing for possibly smaller lot sizes in RCI. But obviously there's considerations because there's no town infrastructure. But it's possible down the road to work with North Berwick and South Berwick to start trying to bring infrastructure along Route 4.
Mm-hmm.
This is only commercial, not industrial.
Well, commercial and industrial. Anything non-residential, basically. Number 3, I think the parking requirements, I don't think have changed in 30 years, really all that much. So it'd be good to look at them sometime. I we'll get to aesthetics and I'll invite Dan up for aesthetics. And then I have something for, so there was a housing bond just released for senior improvements. We have a couple that's planning for their retirement, and they want to make some improvements to their house. They want to bring, I think they want to bring a bathroom or something to the first floor, and they want to bring in a screened-in porch, and they're just getting ready to make their house more age-friendly so they can age in place. And I think they're 5 feet short with their setback or something. So I'm just wondering if there's a way we can build in reductions for people that are anticipating, living in their house for the rest of their life.
Did you look at that section of the Waterboro ordinance that I suggested?
I did. I think I had some, so can you?
2.08. There is an allowance for reductions of setbacks. So, for example, it wouldn't be for the whole house, but if you've got a house that is only 5 feet from the side yard property line, and there's an alcove out back that juts in and it goes to like a 20-foot setback, and the side yard setback may be 25 feet. So you're telling them you can't do an addition here, but the reduction in the setback ordinance, the way it's written, would allow that to be filled in and meet the fascia of the minimum setback of the house that exists, provided it's no closer to the setback line than I think 10 feet. It allows for people to be able to expand their house so that if you need or want to fill in an alcove or something that exists, you can do that and not worry about not meeting the setback. There's allowance for handicap accessibility ramps to be put on in the front yard without without meeting setbacks. You just issue a building permit.
So
and state
that
law
would not,
allows
there'd be no variance
That's correct. The state
required, it
law-
would be code would,
Yeah, the state law
look
is
at
written
it
in a funny way for that. Under the Board of Appeals, it actually says that the zoning board of appeals shall issue. So it's like, well, if they're telling you you shall issue a variance, why even bother going through the process? Just issue the permit. And so some towns have done that. So there are things that we can do, but 2.0, I think it's 2.08 in the Waterboro ordinance may help address a lot of that stuff. So let's pull that and see if that would work.
To follow up what Lee J just said, I'm fine with this, but I don't think we should limit it to just age-related issues. There are people with disabilities
Right.
who will have the same exact concerns about living in place.
Sure, you got a wheel, you handicap.
Yeah,
You could be
may
20
have-
years old and have a wheelchair.
You may have a child.
You need to blow out the house.
Needs an additional space.
Yeah.
So as long as we can enlarge who can be benefited by it, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think this 2.08 is not age discriminatory. It's.
well, that's good, because who,
Yeah.
when that age older person
Mhm.
sells that house,
Mhm.
it could be sold to a 25-year-old
That's right,
family.
exactly. So, I mean, it might be one way, and maybe it's something we want to tinker with, but I think let's take a look at it and see. It might help in this case.
And I'll invite Mr. Vincent up for our aesthetics portion of the evening.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. The enforcement office has recently been changed over to an office that's always concerned about aesthetics. When I drive around town and see satellite dishes on the front of the house, or Quonset huts showing up in a lot of different houses, I think it affects the quality of the aesthetic values that the community has. So when I drive down the road and there's a Comcast guy and he's getting out of his truck and he's got a stepladder because he's going to put it on the porch right in front of the house, and I say, why are you doing that right in front of the house? He says, I don't want to take that 32-foot ladder out of my truck and do all that work. So really, he could have put it another place. We wouldn't have seen it from the road. We wouldn't be, EJ, I don't know if it would be regulating, if that would be called regulation, that we have the opportunity to regulate that under the state and federal laws. If we could possibly do that, I think it would be a benefit to the community. And I'm sure you've seen where there's 4, 5, 6 of them on the face of a building at times. And when they could put it in the back of the roof, they haven't, or they stick out from the window and try to latch it on to the second floor wall. It's just obvious, and it just doesn't seem like it should be there. The second issue is with the Quonset huts. Certainly they provide a purpose. Nobody wants to build a barn or a shed, but without the barn or the shed being built and continue to allow Quonset huts, I think the town is suffering because of the opportunity for the tax money on the property itself. So 2 things, I think they're unsightly, and I don't think the town's reaping the benefits it can from the structures that are on the individual properties.
They are considered temporary, right? Is that why?
Why they're there?
Well, usually they're fabric on a metal frame.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if they're temporary. It's still there.
I
It's
got
still
one that my parents
visual.
had one. I tell you, it's not temporary
Yeah, I know they'll last 25 years, but.
for their boats. But
Temporarily permanent.
well, one other thing, we have something in our village overlay district for chain link fences, but it's worded in a way for like only residential uses or something. But we might want to consider not allowing chain link fences, maybe just starting in the village overlay district or R1, or I'm not sure how far we want to restrict aesthetics.
And what would be the practical effect? So that people would have to now build solid fences
Or no fence.
or no fence? But I mean, so,
There's other material. There's
Talk about, like, you could get like white the white
Yeah, the PVC.
PVC fences.
Yeah. I mean, we already have, so it says like I don't know the exact thing, but it regulates against chain link fences for like residential uses in the village overlay district.
That's kind of like the go-to fence when you want to keep something in, you know? I mean, it's Home Depot stuff. Not that I particularly like it, but you know, it's very useful for many people. And maybe if it's not in the front yard or, you know, like in the backyard, keep your dog in, that kind of stuff.
Well, the fence could be regulated for the front of the house or the rear of the house or behind the front of the building. The fence could change. Roadside presentations, everything, right?
Well,
I guess the only place I would say it would be okay would be right along the river as a safety issue. Because I know the brewery's got some, right? And that's kind of a safety thing. The other end of the building, if somebody were to start utilizing that, you know, you've got an expanse that just drops off to the water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a safety issue. It's not really, and it's not at the front of a building. And right now it's along a parking lot, but.
Yep.
When I was on the Historical District Commission in Somersworth, GE was doing some work there, and they were putting up a decorative fence similar to the fence at your place on the river right here.
Mm-hmm.
The town manager came along and told the Historical District Commission that we're not going to have that fence beyond the backside of 319, the restaurant that's in Somersworth, because nothing will ever happen there. So they let them put a chain link fence. Then they started to develop the mills on the other side of the river, and now all of a sudden the chain link fence comes into play because nobody thought it would ever have to be an aesthetically pleasing fence. So now we have a chain link fence on one side and a decorative fence similar to yours on the other side of the river, of the canal. So it makes a difference. It's that long look at how aesthetically pleasing the town's going to be. I've been working a lot of the aesthetics. We got trailers that shouldn't be on property. We've trash, dilapidated buildings, illegal businesses, goes on and on. Signage, it all affects the drive-through of the community. Sometimes you drive through the community and you just feel relaxed. You don't know why. It just is a pleasant drive to go through a community. Other times you can drive through that community. There's so many signs in there that you get a little tense from it, and you don't know why it doesn't feel pleasing. But your visual landscape, I think, affects us a lot when we look at either roadside or communities, fences, trees, shrubs, all that stuff. Satellite dishes, Quonset huts.
I think the where we're at is, I mean, we do have standards and we have guidelines, and I think we're kind of comfortable where we're at with what we have. Yeah.
I'm comfortable, but sometimes I have issues about telling people what a very subjective thing is, you know, what you put into your yard. I can, up on Diamond Hill, for example, there's a famous mailbox up there. It's an old
Still
Dodge Charger, and it's all started out as somebody trying to tell the people, you know, we want you to have a proper, we don't want that car in the front yard. Well, it's not a car, it's a mailbox. You know, I mean, you get to contests like this when you try to put subjectivity.
Well, it's easier when we have a precedent.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we're good where we're at aesthetically wise. We deal with some of the stuff you mentioned. Maybe we can think about what we want to do with chain link fences. But once we have a precedent, then I imagine that as development happens, we can become more strict as it develops.
Yeah.
We start honing in on, that's not what we want, and hone in on.
And where would you start applying these new standards? Would it be on conditional uses or subdivisions, or?
Yeah, conditional use.
Conditional uses.
Yeah.
I would think it would occur throughout the town, though, not just typically in the downtown area. Your choice.
Yeah, I don't know, that's, yeah.
That's something that should be, like when we are making major things, we'll send out a questionnaire and get some responses back from townspeople and see
It's a good question.
how they feel.
Yeah.
You know, how do
The
you feel about a
majority
chain link
idea.
fence in the front of your yard, side of your yard, backyard? You know, like.
Or just a,
Kwanzaa huts.
our
yeah.
development question is, how do you feel about the town regulating aesthetics? Do you feel great about it?
Start out with that and then narrow down a couple for examples then.
Yeah, I mean, there are property maintenance codes out there that you can develop just for requiring property aesthetics. We had this very long philosophical conversation in the city of Auburn for a long time about, do you require someone to cut the grass in their lawn? or who cares? You know,
We've
personally.
been through this before.
Oh, yeah. It's,
My inclination is that maybe this is something that the comprehensive plan.
recommends, that's right,
this
look
whole
at it
question
and,
of
yep.
Where are we with aesthetics?
Yep.
You know, do we want to prohibit purple paint throughout Berwick?
Well, you know, a lot of these subdivisions have covenants that that protect these subdivisions. I know, for example, for mine, it has something where it says specifically about fences, also about cars. You can't have broken down cars out there. But they also have something about boats. I have a little boat that I keep on the side of my house, and I don't have a fence on my side. Look at Dan writing it down. He's like, "Stop by Dave's house tomorrow." But according to the covenants, it says no boats or trailers are supposed to be stored in side yards visible from the road unless it's kept in a good manner.
So here's the issue. Unless you have some sort of a homeowners association, who's going to sit down and read your
we
deed
do have a
restrictions?
homeowners association,
Right, but
right.
some don't. I mean,
Right.
you may buy in a deed coveted development with no homeowners association, because they do exist, and may say that, but who's going to enforce it?
Right, but what I was trying to get at was it's restrictive in that we don't in that neighborhood they don't want boat trailers sitting out there.
Right.
Sometimes they can have ladders going up to them, and, you know, just the boats can be falling apart. But there's that caveat in there. It says unless it's kept up in a good manner.
Right.
So I don't want to be too restrictive, especially when it comes to aesthetics, because it's Maine. You know, it's Maine. I mean, what's aesthetically pleasing to one person is not to me. I mean, there's, you know, my house, somebody might come by and they say that looks too cookie cutter or too plain, as opposed to, you know, somebody who has an eccentric type of house. So I would just want to be very careful on that. And I have a satellite dish on the front of my house, and I haven't had DirecTV for 4 years, but that was the only way. That was the only way that the guy could have got a line of sight over the trees.
And that works, yeah, for sure.
What about junk gardens? That's amazing.
Junk gardens, yeah, exactly. A junk garden.
It's artwork.
There's some in town.
Beauty in the eye of the beholder, right?
The building codes that we go by right now are developed by the International Code Council. So they have codes that represent for residential building, commercial building, insulation and energy conservation codes. They also have one which is the property maintenance code, which you probably have heard of. But it's a document ready to be adopted. It's they wrote the book. It's certainly probably open to review, and maybe it's mild enough to fit everybody's ideas of what and how the town should move forward with their aesthetics. Because it does deal with cutting the grass, especially they talk about that because if your neighbor could be sick or they have hay fever or troubles breathing, that's why they want to regulate the cutting of the grass. We got mosquitoes now that aren't feeling well. They don't make us feel well sometimes. Trash, it really covers
I
what
think if
many
you break
feel
it
is-
down, things like trash, I think most people can come to an agreement. The color of your house, I'll bet very few people
Oh,
can
yeah,
come to an
definitely,
agreement. Yeah, it's a topic that probably bears discussion, and I think it should be addressed with questions on next time we have a survey.
Just remember, excuse me. One more, sorry. We're going back for a sec. Shoot, this is important. Marijuana.
Oh, we haven't even gotten there yet.
Not there yet.
That's on every 2 weeks. Bob.
All right, I'll go through this quickly so we can go home. So, number one, definition changes to align with new state changes. You might disagree with me with this for drugstore, but I just removed shall not permit the sale or distribution of marijuana. I mean, if it's a drugstore, marijuana actually becomes a prescription drug. I don't see why we're restricting it from a drugstore. It's entirely possible 5 years down the road, a drugstore is going to want to open up and marijuana might be a medicine.
Well, it's one thing to say medical marijuana needs to be included in a drugstore. Retail marijuana, or I guess what we now call adult use marijuana, seems just to be different. We ought to talk about it differently.
Yeah. I
All
think
right.
you should
I'm not
just
sure how I
say
will come out on it,
medical
but it
marijuana.
seems different to me.
Yeah, you could say shall not permit the sale of adult use marijuana. Now, let's do that
That's a
for
better-
sure.
For now, I could live with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So am I getting this right, James, that the word medical and retail, now the retail is now called adult use marijuana?
That's what the state.
is issued.
That's
Do they define that phrase,
So
adult use?
we don't use the
Yeah.
word retail
Could we put that
anymore.
into the land use ordinance? It's not, I
Just
don't
adult
see it.
use.
And it took me a while to sort of figure out what adult use meant. I wasn't sure whether the plants had to be adults or we did. So, I mean, if they have a definition, can we just put it in here, just so the world will know what it means?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, aren't you proposing that down below? Marijuana store, comma, adult use?
Yeah, and that defines what an adult
Yeah,
use
but the problem
marijuana.
is when the definition of the word includes the word, so it says a medical marijuana store adult use means a place to purchase adult use marijuana.
I
It still
see.
doesn't tell us what adult use is,
Right. Whether it's 21 plus or.
or 18 plus,
Right.
or.
Yeah, I can just take the definition of what
Yeah, I mean,
adult
if it's
use.
already there, just plug it in
Not
and
sure.
make
Yeah.
life simpler for everybody.
So the idea here is to regulate adult use in medical. Basically, it's treating it as the same zoning wise. So marijuana cooperative, those changes. 2 or more medical marijuana caregivers or adult use cultivators claiming a location as a primary residence. So so for people that have their home residence, if they're combining production facilities, it's to close up a loophole. That's what we caught with medical marijuana.
Do I get the feeling here that, at least on the state level, medical marijuana and adult use marijuana are becoming, the line between them is a little blurred?
They're two distinct statutes.
Yeah.
Well, like in number 2 here.
They're gonna be regulated differently at the state level.
But I was under the impression that the state does not have its full laws set out yet. Am I wrong about that?
Well, they have the law. What they don't have is they don't have the, what's the word I'm looking for?
The regulation.
Yeah, they have a committee, I don't know if they're still working, I think they are, a working group.
I thought they weren't gonna deliver until February or later.
Correct, that's what I was gonna say. They're still working on the, not on the law, but on the, regulations that the
All the
department would
guidance
use.
materials,
That's
how you
right.
actually implement all this.
Exactly.
So are we ready to take out, I mean, the note at the bottom of page 2, are we at the point where the state law is sufficiently defined that we can do this now, or do we
I-
need to wait a while?
I think the way the state statute is established, that the rulemaking isn't going to change significantly enough for us to not move forward.
Well, the thing is the timing of
That's
it.
in there. Okay.
But the thing is the timing of it. You're right. They're not going to be ready through rulemaking. Thank you. Yeah, what's your name? But this won't take effect. This won't be in place until town meeting, after town meeting anyway. And I don't think that there's anything in here that would affect whatever occurs at rulemaking. This is more about your local land use law and where you're going to allow that type of a use to occur.
And I actually just, the reason why this is actually coming is I just learned that if the town, so we're splitting, this is part B, so this is gonna be split out for the town to vote on separately. And if the town votes in the affirmative for these changes, this is effectively our opt-in as a community.
Correct.
Where I thought it was a completely, I thought it was a separate, I thought there was actually a vote where you had to opt in on the warrant.
Well, no, opt-in merely means that you're gonna allow it versus you're not gonna allow it. And by stating this, if it's approved, would suggest you're gonna allow it.
So, in the adult use marijuana store, a facility license under Maine Title 28B to purchase adult use marijuana.
Why are we making that conditional in the SCI?
That's what I was just looking at.
That means that you can have a marijuana, either recreation or adult use or medical store right downtown.
Right, yeah.
So that,
That's what we were trying to avoid.
no, that's a,
Well,
that's
a
a
dispensary,
store, not a
Grow
cultivation
facility.
facility.
A grow facility.
It's
I
a
thought
store
we were-
too,
I
yeah.
thought we were trying to locate everything out of the same
For right now, I mean, I don't want
So this is existing. So at first it was a dispensary was allowed in commercial industrial district.
medical was, but not
Medical, sure.
not recreational, not adult
Yep.
use was not allowed in the SCI. But now, since
would
we're
be.
we're putting them
It's all getting lumped
together.
together.
Yeah, I mean, if you, well, so a medical marijuana storefront. I mean, we can separate that if
I
you,
think it needs to be separate.
if you want
That's why-
recreation. I mean, you want adult use to be on just RCI.
That was my point a little while ago, that I mentioned
I
the
just
line
don't-
between adult use and medical seems to be disappearing in here.
I think for our purposes, it is. I mean, for anyone, Mike, you could talk about it, but like, for a medical marijuana storefront to operate, you get a card and it's not,
It's not that difficult, but for adult use, the regulations are it's gonna be a lot more difficult to get in, is basically what's gonna happen.
For adult use.
For adult use, yes.
To get- what do you mean?
Well, to get like a store or anything like that, you're gonna have way more licensing and stuff. Where like a caregiver, you can open up a store just by being a caregiver.
Okay, so that means that for what we were just talking about here, you could open up a storefront, and if you get a license for both medical and adult use, that storefront is selling both.
Could.
So you're gonna have
It
the.
could,
the-
but if we wrote it so that if we only allow it in certain areas, then it would only stay medical at that point.
I don't know if we want to mix those at this
Can I
point in
make
time.
it-
I'd want
I
to keep
think,
them
I
separate.
think for the
I think-
storefront dispensary, I think they should be separated.
Right.
Well, first,
would agree.
the phrase that's used here, marijuana store / dispensary, adult use and medical, is not what's actually in the definition section, even the proposed. So if we could have the uses conform to what the definitions are, that would just be a beginning. Secondly, I would recommend that we separate medical from adult use.
Yeah.
And then we can decide SCIs. I'm assuming on medical, it's not an issue, but
Right.
we ought to talk about the adult use. But we need to use the right phrases, and I think we do need to separate the two
Yeah.
from the table. I mean, the actual
I think
phrase is medical marijuana dispensary / storefront, and we have it marijuana store / dispensary, adult use and medical. We just need to be consistent.
yeah, it's not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why, like, if you see on the first page, you see marijuana store, adult use, and the reason why it's kind of reversed that way is I think if someone goes in the land use ordinance, they're gonna be looking for marijuana. You know, that's no problem. All right, that's cool. That makes sense. Number 3, that's my swift way of making sure that we separate butane extraction and ethanol extraction. I think like we learned with Aaron's project, ethanol extraction is less of a dangerous,
Less volatile.
thank you.
Yeah.
So we're specifying that butane extraction is an explosive materials and it needs to follow section 7.3.
So I got a quick question on that, being dangerous with the building code. Here we say butane extraction is considered an industrial use. I'm wondering if it's in the building code, is it considered a high hazard use?
Well, so here's another thing, is to run butane, you need a special license, and it also has to be a state certified C1, D1 blast room. So technically, if it's done in a right manner, it shouldn't really matter, because on a small scale.
No, but from a building code standpoint, it's gonna matter how they construct it.
Right,
And I'm
right.
just thinking of,
I-
again, consistency with wording, and if we say it's an industrial use versus a high hazard use.
Okay.
And the whole thing with that is you're allowing production facilities, so they're allowed in R3 along Route 9.
Yep.
You would you would take the butane extraction. You'd only be allowed on RCI.
Okay.
Let's just get through this. So 4, we don't have to go too deep.
In-state,
It's only his first time back, too.
In-state, what is in-state? We're authorizing the select board to instate a licensing schedule. What is that?
Yeah, I had.
What is in-state?
Implement.
word?
Implement.
If in-state's a word, I'm
That's
fine
in,
with
I don't.
it.
Is it not a word? I don't know.
I never
Sounds
heard of
good.
in-state before.
My Grammarly didn't pick up on it.
That's
So I
compared
think
to
I'm-
out-of-state, but
Yeah, I put a red mark on mine.
Yeah.
Institute,
Yeah.
Lee, hadn't you talked about some sort of I'm not sure whether it was a lottery or a
Yes.
bidding process for licensing?
yes,
We never really have talked about that.
no.
And this sort of prevents us from talking about it.
yeah.
Don't look at me, I didn't draft it.
So
If you know what in-state
one. So
No.
so one thing
In-state.
we can talk about this next meeting, and we'll do some research on the lottery stuff. So it was Hollowell, I think. They did a lottery, and they denied somebody based off of something that happened
Prior
30 years
conviction,
ago,
Yeah.
and it just. I don't think that's something we want to get involved with.
That was a different issue. Because I remember reading this in the
yeah.
paper. He had a criminal conviction 30 years ago, and the question was
withheld
he
it.
prevented from bidding because of it? That's a totally different, I mean, we're gonna have that issue even the way you have set out here on the $500 licenses.
Yeah.
Who's qualified to apply for one is gonna be an issue somebody's gonna have to deal with, either the state or us locally. But that's a different question than this bidding thing.
You're still, yeah, sure. I mean, you're still gonna have to have a committee or group that awards
Yeah,
the
and we
bid.
still have to determine who's
Which is fine.
qualified to apply for these things. You just can't have anybody in the universe do it.
Well, and I think, I'll kind of jump in here. I think, to James's defense, one of the things is that talk about recommendation to the select board about a licensing schedule. He has an application form, if you will, that's like 6 pages long that the town of Hollowell uses. And that would be something we'd want to institute here as well. And that provides enough information for the police department to do a background check. So the police department can then make a recommendation as to whether they're worthy to even be able to be issued a license or not.
But are there gonna be state rules about who's eligible to apply for a license, or are we gonna have to do that?
Well, like with a caregiver, you can't have any.
No, I understand that, but this is, somebody wants to
Right.
apply for a retail license,
I hate
adult use license.
with an attorney in the room, I hate saying this. I assume the state is going to have
Right.
something like
Some
that in their
guidelines.
guidelines, yes.
I know, right?
If
I
you
would
remember,
wait
if you
on
remember
that,
about
yeah.
people who assume.
That's why I said that. I knew
I
you'd
don't
pick
know,
up
they're-
on that
they're
now.
pretty- They're pretty.
And
With
again,
cannabis,
I'm
they're pretty on
suggesting
top of it, so
we
they'll.
just ought to wait and see what they
Yeah,
do.
exactly.
I mean, it would not surprise me that they may give us some authority to do something as well.
They know, I know some of the
They may
bigger.
say, you know, these are the statewide 6 things, and if you wanna add some,
Yep.
you can do it also.
I mean, I know
It's
just like
possible.
tattoo parlors, some of the municipalities with their own police department do their own background checks. Whether this is going to be just the state police doing it, or whether it's going to be, state police and municipalities.
I
need-
understand, but the question is, what do you do once you find something? I mean, it's one thing to say do a background check,
If-
and, you know,
right.
and this is the example in
Well,
Holloway. This guy had some
Yeah,
criminal violation 30 years ago.
yeah.
Somebody's gotta decide whether that matters or not.
Again, I would assume
Yeah, don't
the
even-
rulemaking.
It's too late to even go there, don't even waste your time.
That the rulemaking process at the state is going to address that and say who and who can and who cannot.
I
apply.
hope you're right.
Next on the agenda is the adjournment.
I move that we adjourn the January 17th meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?